Ladies and gentlemen, what did I tell you? Did I not tell you that Twitter was going to experience some horrendous financial consequences from banning President Trump? I had a segment a couple of days ago, before today, before Twitter lost $5 billion in market cap or market value. I stated that Twitter is going to become basically another MySpace. It's not going to exist in about 5 or 6 years, maybe sooner. I said that financial troubles, serious financial troubles, awaited the company after alienating 74 million supporters of President Trump. Today, the company tanked. Twitter shares closed down more than 6% first day after Trump ban. It was actually more than that. Twitter loses $5 billion in market value after Trump is permanently barred from the platform. January 11, 2021, 5:12 p.m. This is BusinessInsider.com. Twitter stock price tumbled as much as 12% on Monday. A couple of days ago, I told you that something like this was going to happen. Okay? I single-handedly tanked Twitter stock. No, I'm joking. Or I told you, I forecasted exactly what would take place. I'm joking, obviously. Hit subscribe to this channel. Get this segment viral. I'm not right about everything, but I'm right about a lot of things that most people aren't talking about. Most people have not brought up the fact that not only will Twitter become MySpace, and Twitter will become a pretty irrelevant platform very soon, within the near future. But I was talking about $3.43 billion in debt. They're loaded with debt. And the first time they made a profit was in 2018, and they believe in 2019 they made a profit too. 2020, I'm not certain if they will. But they're not increasing their revenue or their profit to the point where they can justify this $3.43 billion in debt, because they don't have a long-term business model. They've alienated 74 million people. They've banned people for specific reasons when they don't apply those reasons to liberals or Democrats or people on the left. The next group of people they're going to go after is the far left. Progressives are next. So, I saw this happen. I saw what takes place on the left. I said the first voices they silence are usually progressive and left-leaning voices. Then they go after conservatives. Now the tables are a little bit reversed. They went after conservatives first. Now they're going to go after progressives. And the platform's going to shrink even more. But debt has gone up from $2.7 billion. And I'll put the links below. Debt has gone up from $2.7 billion last year to $3.43 billion this year. That's well over $1.7 billion in debt. Okay? That's not the revenues did not increase anywhere close to anywhere close to $1 billion year over year. So they're in a world of hurt. You had the first quarter, they had a loss of $8.7 million. The second quarter, they had a loss of over $1 billion because of tax issues. Third quarter, they made a profit this year. Fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen, but if they manage to eke out a profit, it's not going to justify investing in a stock or a company that doesn't have a long-term business model. What's the long-term business model? Alienating even more people? I told you the other day, and it was not investment advice, but I had the pulse of what was going on, and I usually do on this channel. Tell your friends about this channel. I told you, I said, look, Twitter is done. Now, Forbes has a pretty awesome, article. Twitter is the worst company on planet Earth. This is something I would write. Here's how to bet against the stock and deactivate your account. So if you're watching this right now, I deactivated my account in 2018. Jamal Thomas, a really awesome YouTuber, he's on the left. He's a progressive. So if you're on the left, you're watching this, subscribe to his channel. He probably disagrees with me. I know he disagrees with me on a whole lot of things, but he's a fantastic human being. Jamal Thomas is an awesome person, has a great channel. He documented the day I left Twitter. I have this Twitter impersonator, but see, again, he's breaking the law, the Twitter impersonator, but see, that's what people do. They break the law all the time on the left. Tim Pool, Andy No, and Ian Miles Chong on a daily or weekly basis get people doing the most or making the most horrendous claims against them, the most absurd or basically threatening claims, breaking the law, and Twitter does nothing to protect Andy No, Ian Miles Chong, and Tim Pool, three of the best journalists we have in this country. Twitter does not delete or deactivate or suspend accounts when they go after from an illegal vantage point, or when they commit illegal acts against journalists that perhaps are independent or more conservative in their viewpoint. They don't apply the same standards that they apply to conservatives. Everyone knows this. Twitter is not a global commons where you can debate and discuss, and the algorithm there, or the terms of service, or Jack Dorsey and everybody else at Twitter, what they do is they say, look, we're going to tailor our platform to elevate and amplify Democratic Party ideals or liberal viewpoints on politics. Conservative views are going to either be suppressed or they're going to be just outright deleted. The accounts will be deactivated. And with what they did with President Trump is they said, well, he stated he wasn't going to the inauguration. This means they interpreted it as a subliminal message or a dog whistle. He actually didn't even break the terms of service. But see, that's a whole other story. Twitter is run and Twitter operates by this hypocritical standard, this disingenuous, duplicitous way of doing business. If you're Maxine Waters and you actually tell people to get in the faces of conservatives or supporters of President Trump, your account won't be deactivated. But if it's Trump saying something that has nothing to do with, well, Trump never told anyone to do anything. They're utilizing that horrific event, which I condemn as the worst thing that could ever have happened to President Trump or 74 million supporters of President Trump. The main issue is the loss of life. But President Trump never told anyone to do anything. He never compelled anyone to do anything. Just like Maxine Waters actually stated specifically, get in the faces of people. Other Democrats said the same types of things, but there was no outrage. Political discourse in this country runs through the lenses and also through the apps and through the tech platforms of liberal Democrats. So when they made baseless allegations against President Trump from a Steele dossier that was published, it was unverified when it was published. It was actually, the title is, these are unverified claims, and they asked Ben Smith of BuzzFeed, and he said, well, we're just going to let the people decide. Could you imagine if Trump said, I'm going to make these allegations, we're going to let the people decide, which is essentially what he said. So the double standard exists from a political perspective. But this article, this is Forbes. So first and foremost, here is how to deactivate your Twitter account. I use the sex on our, but I do stocks, not activism. And even if a new type of conscious capitalism is my investment strategy for 2021, I still need to make some money. Twitter shares are plunging 7% in pre-market trading Monday, and the market will soon realize that this platform is going to shrink dramatically. What have I been telling you the past 2 years? I've been telling you it's a boiling cauldron of angry, disgruntled, apoplectic, seething, fuming, fanatical, hysterical, morally superior, indignant liberals. That's it. That's not a recipe for a long-term business model. It's a platform where vapid, fleeting sentiment is published, and it's generally a platform for politics. Generally, a platform that is utilized to silence and denigrate and disparage conservative thought or anything to do with President Trump, and elevate and amplify any tinfoil hat fantasy the Democrats have. Trump working with Russia was completely baseless. There was an ODNI report based on high to moderate confidence. There was a Steele dossier that was complete garbage and nonsense that even Chuck Todd called out. There was a third-party tech firm that in Congress stated they didn't have any direct evidence. Trump was not impeached on anything to do with conspiring alongside Russia. He never did. Yet there were never any disclaimers. This is a disputed claim. There were never any, oh my goodness, caution, warning. This is a disputed claim. I mean, this is absurd. We're going to look back at Twitter and say, okay, when you look at Hillary Clinton, who stated that Trump is an illegitimate president, you look at Adam Schiff constantly on Twitter making baseless allegations about President Trump and Putin. You look at every Democrat calling Trump names like a sociopath. It's not a sociopath. President Trump allocated more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever. His administration absolved $300 million in loans from Katrina. This is a very good thing. Signed prison reform legislation. So, but still on Twitter, you have these extreme viewpoints calling him a racist every single day. A supremacist. There's no backing for this. He did better among non-white voters than any other president, than any other Republican in the last 60 years, according to Newsweek and other sources. So he got a greater percentage of the black and African American vote than he did in 2016, a greater percentage of Asian Americans, a greater percentage of Hispanic and Latino voters than in 2016. And a greater percentage of the non-white vote than any, like I said, than any candidate in Republican candidate in decades. So, did you see Twitter trying to legislate or, force some type of context or nuance within the accusations, or trying to mitigate or dilute the accusations against Trump? Or trying to say, okay, well, here's a disclaimer. You can't say that because that might compel 5 months of protests that just happened to coincide with buildings being set ablaze and CNN saying fiery but peaceful. You have left-leaning organizations that have been linked to illegal activity on Twitter, and they are never deactivated. And Ian Miles Chong, Andy Ngo, and Tim Pool have documented this. But again, the Twitter impersonator that has impersonated me breaking the law all the time. Twitter knows. I think they've suspended the account once or twice, but Twitter knows. But they haven't deactivated the account completely. Amazon knows because the person was illegally sharing books on Amazon. My books on Amazon illegally. But, I mean, they're slow to act when it's anything to do with a conservative or supporter of President Trump. They went after, by the way, Bernie Sanders supporters in 2016, or it was, let's put it this way, anyone to the far left or to the left of the Democratic Party, those people will be the next individuals that face a ban or censorship on not just Twitter, other platforms as well. But here, even on a good day, Twitter is a cesspool of, okay, that's just true, lies, and a trending algorithm that seems to have a remarkably consistent left-wing bias. Exactly. I will not be the last person to cancel it. Exactly. This is a fantastic article by Jim Collins in Forbes. Fantastic article. Twitter's self-reported user base grew at a whopping 1% sequentially in third quarter 2020. 1% with $3.4 billion in debt, with 1% growth internationally and 0% in the U.S. This platform is not going to be around, and Trump is sending it into bankruptcy single-handedly. Really, the comparisons were much better on a year-on-year basis, 29% overall. But remember that 2020 was an extraordinary year for news flows. But Twitter is not news. I think that Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, this is true. I agree with this. I agree with the journalist here. In dollars, though, Twitter generated $936 million in revenues in the third quarter and produced a very low 6% operating margin, 3% net margin. So after a whopping $1 billion loss in quarter two, Twitter recovered to make $28 million in the third quarter. Wow, that's just irrelevant. It's true when you consider, like, if you have a $1 billion loss, you have an $8 million loss in the first quarter, a $1 billion loss in the second quarter, and you rebound with $28 million, but you still have $3.4 billion in debt, and you have no long-term business strategy. These people are billionaires because they took advantage of a moment in time. Twitter was viewed for years as like this global commons of where people throughout the world can share ideas and talk. And now it's just become, like I said, Tron for disgruntled liberals. It is not a global commons. It will be just as irrelevant as MySpace. And I've been saying that. And MySpace was a much better platform. It didn't breed. See, if you want to talk about Trump and, any incitement of emotion or negative behavior, Twitter is a bastion, a cauldron of extreme viewpoints on the left, where left-leaning political, activists or operatives or whatever, their speech is never regulated. And their behavior or the consequences of their words are never addressed by the brass at Twitter. And everyone knows this hypocrisy. They've tanked today in terms of their stock price, and they've lost $5 billion in terms of market value because it's not a platform that's going to survive, because there's no reason to go and type in a small number of characters, and there's no reason to do that. Nobody's going to remember what you wrote a year from now, 2 years from now. The platform is not going to even exist 4 or 5 years from now. Unless you take screenshots of your tweets, which is why I say deactivate your account, or unless you take screenshots of the tweets of others, it's going to be completely irrelevant. Twitter will be as irrelevant as a fleeting thought, because the platform is based on fleeting thoughts, which are generally negative. You've had more negative emotions on that platform than any other platform, even Facebook. If you can, do you remember I think it was Ghostbusters 2, the slime that bubbled up with negativity? There's enough negativity to fill the universe with that bubbling slime from Twitter. The Ghostbusters 2 bubbling slime that bubbles from negative emotions and thought, there's more of that on a daily basis on Twitter. There's enough of that, I should say, to just have all of that bubble across the ever-expanding universe. Twitter is the absolute worst, and this is a fantastic Forbes article. But anyway, with negative free cash flow of $74 million in quarter three, but $7.6 billion of cash and securities on the balance sheet. But they have $3.4 billion $3.4 billion in debt. Twitter is worth more than zero, but extraordinarily less than 51.48 per share. The market was according to Twitter Stock Friday. Yes, we have completely forgot how to value stocks. Twitter is not the only one, but it's the easy one. With earnings power of less than $1 billion, reported net income of $1.469 billion in 2016. And will be nowhere near that in 2020. I think this is a steady state stock. No growth, no dividend, no free cash flow to speak of. That doesn't deserve even a market multiple. But since it's tech, let's give Twitter the insane 25 times real earnings power that the S&P 500 is granted. So add about $5 billion in cash or real earnings power of $750 annually, and used But Twitter's users base has shrunk dramatically in the past week, I believe. And so $30 is really more of a best-case scenario. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of a stock, do you think this platform is going to grow? What are the chances it grows? Where are you going to... What, are there going to be more apoplectic liberals? They've maxed out on fanatical liberals. So where are they going to get users? Who goes? Well, okay, young people have even young people are leaving Instagram even. So young people are not there. Conservatives are not there. The president of the United States is no longer there. They're banning anyone they don't like. You know, threats against people's lives are only addressed if it's against a certain political stance, but not against other political stances. So then what? Your information, 15 to 20% of their business model is based on just selling information associated with buying habits and, you know, what you look at online or on Twitter. And then it's advertising. Why would you advertise on Twitter? Okay. I thought Twitter bots also swung November of 2016 because the Russians did that. So they alongside Facebook, helped President Trump inadvertently, if you believe that tinfoil hat fantasy. So you have this Jim Collins, this is a fantastic article from Forbes. Twitter is a faux tech outfit with no competitive moat and a customer base filled with, it would seem, idiots. It's too small to be considered big tech, but the media has given it outsized influence. Only you and I can fight. Okay, so delete your account and short the stock, making money while doing the right. I'm not telling you to short the stock, but I'm not giving any investment advice. All I'm telling you is that in my humble viewpoint, if you invest long-term in this company, you might as well be just throwing money down the toilet. It is a platform that, social media is pretty much worthless, aside from perhaps, contacting people, old friends, people that you haven't seen in a long time that you've lost track of. Other than that, you don't need to, there's no worth, there's no value to going on to a platform where you have just a small number of characters to express a fleeting thought or get into arguments with people. Like, life is difficult enough. Why go into Tron? You know, the 80s movie Tron. Why go into a cyber reality? Why go into the Matrix? People want to get out of the Matrix. People in Tron, they wanted to get out of the video game. Why go into a cyber reality that's run by, if you're a conservative or if you're a Trump supporter, or if you're on the far left? The second the far left gets any teeth politically, they'll be crushed by Democrats also. Right now, Democrats are winning. They've achieved a momentary victory, and they're squeezing and they're pressing and they're turning. The vice is turning, and they're trying to, just gain every single ounce of political utility from all of this. They're banning President Trump. Parler is no longer in existence now. Conservative sites are deactivated. People are leaving, so that's a good thing on their own. I left 2 years ago. I was 2 years ahead of all of this. But Twitter served to prop up the hysteria and the frenzy regarding Trump-Russia, regarding impeachment. If you didn't have that platform, all you would have is the Washington Post and CNN, which base a large percentage of their stories on Twitter, on what's happening on Twitter anyway. And it has to be a quarter to a third of all the stories about Trump were regarding his Twitter account. Twitter helped fuel the irrational, apoplectic, seething contempt and disdain for Trump. There was never a day where extreme viewpoints weren't leveled at Trump. And when President Trump made the same type of allegations that they made in 2016, they then utilized the same platform to elevate their baseless claims, to delegitimize any claims and to actually suppress any discussion. So when it was the New York Post article and breakthrough stories about Caligula, Biden's son, and his laptop, Twitter then made sure that that information wasn't allowed to be looked at. But when it was the Steele dossier, no problem. They do not apply the same standards to conservatives or Trump supporters that they do to liberals and Democrats. And that's not just that platform. It's pretty much every social media platform, every dominant social media platform. Facebook is next eventually. Facebook will probably last a lot longer. They probably have, I think they have a lot better, they have a lot more cash and they have a better business model. They have investments like Instagram. But Facebook is pretty irrelevant right now also. I mean, reality is tough enough. You don't need to get into a cyber world where you're just going to argue with people all the time. And finally, the thing that I can't stand about Twitter, which is why the $5 billion loss that President Trump, that is linked to what they did to President Trump, is justified. But when you look at the level of disinformation from reputable or from exalted individuals on the left, quote unquote reputable, when you look at how Democratic Party, like AOC, for example, in the House of Representatives, Yad Vashem had to refute her claims on Twitter. And yet still progressives defending or left-leaning people defending AOC was actually tried to go and correct Yad Vashem. I mean, the disinformation is so prevalent, and they're so oblivious to the disinformation because they're in the tank for one political side. Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, in Israel, stated that AOC was categorically wrong. And I wrote a Jerusalem Post article on that. And you can see my writing on the Hill, the Huffington Post, Salon, the Jerusalem Post, the Federalist. You can go to my website, hagoodman.com. Also, I will say, the whole Q nonsense, which is dangerous, and I stated it was 2 years ago also, would only hurt President Trump, and it's hurt President Trump and 74 million supporters of President Trump more than we could ever have imagined in the past couple of days. That whole thing was, it wasn't just Twitter, actually, there's a whole bunch of other platforms, but message boards in general are worthless. Twitter is a glorified message board. It's like, Twitter is like Reddit if you only had fleeting thoughts. And Reddit is also just a bunch of fleeting thoughts also. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Twitter is toast. I told you this 4 or 5 days ago, less than that. Give me your thoughts below, and now today happens. $5 billion lost in market value. Give me your thoughts. Thank you. Hit subscribe to this channel. If you want to support my voice long term, my Patreon is below. Thank you.